Alright friends, welcome back. So, as most Sundays and Wednesdays go, I usually do a music review or a reaction to something. And today I'm going to be doing something a little different. Lately we've been doing a lot of World War I and World War II Sabaton songs. I'm going to be changing up today. Obviously you know what it is because you clicked on this video. But we'll be covering the Battle of Rorke's Drift in the Sabaton song from their album Last Stand called Rorke's Drift. Just quick before we get into that, welcome to my channel. My name is Tim. This is a channel full of history lovers. On Sundays and Wednesdays, always do reaction videos. Mondays and Fridays, I do original content. Last Monday, obviously, I did not because it was 9/11 and I'm from New York and I had family involved. I took the day off to reflect and everything. But if you enjoy the video, if you enjoy all my content, please like, share, and please subscribe. If you're returning and you often come back to watch my videos, please subscribe. I do look at my analytics. I see a lot of you are returning. You're just not subscribed yet. We've hit 500. We're on our way to being monetized. Thank you so much, everyone, for help. And let's get into it. So, the Battle of Rorke's Drift took place on January 22nd, 1879. Now, what happened was in South Africa, the Zulu Empire had kind of threatened the control and hegemony of the British Empire in Africa. The King Cetshwayo was, in a way, kind of just saying, leave us alone, we will run our empire, you can have your empire, that's it. The British ended up giving an ultimatum, which actually was not sanctioned by the British Foreign Office or the Prime Minister. It was done by the British Governor General, Sir Bar Frere. So the ultimatum pretty much said you need to adhere to our laws, you need to pretty much become a vassal state to us, or it's war. If you do not agree to any of our terms, it's war. Cetshwayo obviously said, well, no, I'm not giving up my people's lifestyle for you, so no. So what ended up happening was, on January 22nd, early in the morning, let's rewind a little bit. In early January, the British Army invaded Zululand in 3 columns. One in the north, one in the center, and one in the south. The army in the center was the one that was commanded by the British commander in South Africa, Lord Chelmsford. Chelmsford ended up getting some false intel about where the Zulu army, or impi, which that's the Zulu word for army, where the Zulu impi was actually located. So he ended up splitting the center army, leaving about 1,600 or 2,000 men at Isandlwana, a mountain in Zululand. He ended up moving east, trying to find the said impi, but while this happened on January 22nd, 1879, the Zulu attacked the encampment at Isandlwana. The British were humiliated. It was a massacre. The Zulus completely wiped out the British defenders. But what ended up happening was the reserves of the Zulu army, and I have some videos on the Zulu War, which I will leave links to, as I do with all my videos if I've done related subjects to them. The Zulu prince that was in command of the reserves was Cetshwayo's brother. He was very angry because his men didn't get to fight. So he demanded to be able to, go and fight. So he ended up breaking his brother's orders. He was told, do not invade the British territories. We are strictly fighting a defensive war. We do not want to give the enemy any reason to attack us more. We are just defending ourselves. What his brother ended up doing was crossing the Buffalo River, which was what separated the British South Africa from Zululand, and laying siege to a British outpost called Rorke's Drift. Now, Rorke's Drift at the time was being commanded by a man named Gonville Bromhead, a lieutenant in the 24th Regiment of Foot, a Welsh regiment, which the roots of it still remain today in the Welsh Guards. But ended up was not being commanded. The defense was actually not commanded by Bromhead. The defense would be commanded by Lieutenant John Chard of the Royal Engineers. Now, Chard was sent back from Isandlwana to build bridges to help more men cross into Zululand, because the idea was the 3 columns would converge on the Zulu capital, but you were going to need men to maintain order and bring more troops in, which Frey and Chelmsford had already asked for more troops, and it was believed they will be getting them, and they did get them. But when the news of Isandlwana reached them later in the day, because again, this all happened early in the morning and afternoon, he ended up taking command, and they made a defense. They had two options. They could retreat back to Pietzenburg, the capital, or they could hold their grounds. Now, they had with them a Boer. Now, for those of you that don't know what Boers are South African settlers of Dutch and German heritage. They had a Boer officer with them named Arendorf, who actually, sadly, would go on to die fighting the British in the Second Boer War. But he told them, he's like, you're not going to outrun the Zulus. The Zulus are going to outrun you. So they ended up with a little over 100 men holding Rorke Drift. And that's what this song is about. So I think we spent enough time explaining it. Let's get into it. All right, so we're back with our buddy A.S. Cotter. I really have to reach out to him because I use so many of his videos. He's one of the best editors out there so far with all the videos we've shown. I think I've only used 2 videos that weren't from him. He does a great job. So always I give him a big shout out. I always leave the link to his video in the description, along with Sabaton's lyric videos, and if they have one, official music videos. But they don't do a lot of official music videos unless it's like World War II era and stuff. But so, like I said, this right now, what we're viewing on the screen right now, is from a film called Zulu Dawn. Now, they've made 2 films about the Zulu Wars and kind of a series. So Zulu Dawn actually was made after the first movie, which is called Zulu. Zulu is about the Battle of Rorke Drift. It actually stars Stanley Baker as John Chard, the Royal Engineer officer. And it actually stars, in his first big screen role, Sir Michael Caine as Lieutenant Gonville Bromhead. Now, the funny thing about it is Bromhead actually was not a good and proper officer the way that Michael Caine acts in the movie. He actually was kind of... people thought he was stupid because he was, I believe, deaf in one ear. So a lot of people thought he was just an idiot, which he wasn't. He actually, I believe he retired from the military with the rank of a major. Chard also... both men had facial hair, but obviously the movie was made in the 70s, so, you know, clean look was more what people were expecting. But then, a few years later, they made another movie called Zulu Dawn. Now, Zulu Dawn takes place before. It discusses the ultimatum, it discusses the invasion, and it discusses the Battle of Isandlwana. That movie is that has Peter O'Toole starring in it, along with oh my gosh, I forgot his name. Another big name actor, very good actor. I forgot his name though. But that's where we're going to be starting because obviously you want to know the intro and everything that's going on. So this is the British Army crossing into Zululand. Now, before we actually get into the song proper, I think this is very important to know. You know, here in the United States, when we talk about the most humiliating defeat a modern army ever suffered, we always think back on Little Bighorn, the Battle of Little Bighorn, where at the time, Colonel Custer and the 7th Cavalry tried to take on the combined nations of the Plains and got massacred. I am one that actually disagrees with that statement, that was not the most humiliating defeat. The reason I say that is because at the Battle of Isandlwana, the British had artillery, they had rockets, they had full platoons and companies with rifles, repeating rifles. They had pretty much they had the superior ground, they had everything that would have meant winning. They had reserve cavalry, they had everything. Little Bighorn, it comes down to, Custer didn't even have a full regiment with him, and he denied Gatling guns and artillery and everything. So Little Bighorn is more of Custer's ego getting everyone killed, whereas Battle of Isandlwana, they had all the tools to, in theory, win the battle. But they just didn't. They got overwhelmed, and also Henry Poulain, the man left in command of Isandlwana, the colonel of the 24th Regiment of Foot, he was much more of a offensive general than a defensive general. Well, commander. Obviously, he was a colonel, but he was much more of a defensive commander than he was much more of an offensive commander than a defensive commander. So, and that's why, he did stupid things like have the lines of men waiting for the Zulus outside, or not corralling his wagons, or just leaving it an open camp and not entrenching. And a lot of that led to the defeat of Isandlwana.
News that came the morning told that the main force had been slain. Chance for peace and justice gone, and the cause had been in vain. The prince had been abandoned, and he had gone the path of war. Now the 1,500 men are dead, and the Zulus at the door. Zulus attack, fight back to back. Show them no mercy and fire at will. Kill or be killed, facing or waiting a hostile spear. A new frontier, the end is near. There's no surrender, the lines must hold. The story told, Rorke controlled. Nature of the fateful day as they head towards the drift.
So, real quick, another thing is interesting. They talk about Prince disgrace, all that things. That's what happened. As I said before, the prince, the Cetshwayo's brother, was like, we didn't get the fight. We want to fight. We want to, it's unfair. The Zulu, in retrospect, did not actually have that many men at Rorke's Drift. It was just the reserves. The main impi had actually started making their way back to Yalundi, to the Zulu capital. Because while this is something that these movies and a lot of people, when they think about the Zulu War, forget. There were two other columns fighting, and both columns also got ambushed. Now, it was nothing compared to Isandlwana, but the reason Isandlwana was so bad was because that's where the main impi was sent to fight, while smaller impis took on the other two forces. And, another big thing I forgot to mention about Isandlwana compared to Rorke's Drift. Rorke's Drift, the fact that they entrenched, and, you could criticize me about the statement in the comments. I apologize for those of you that do comment and I'm not getting back to you. I've been working a lot lately. I'm very sorry. But the Martini Henry was a very new weapon. It was very... You had two gun companies, Henry and Martini, coming together to make this rifle. At Isandlwana, what ended up happening was the guns were overheating. So what that means is the barrels would shrink, the carriage wouldn't even really work, guys would be loading and the bullets won't be firing, or the thing won't even close. Rorke's Drift, they were much luckier because of the way they were fighting. The Zulus had to run against these melee boxes and walls like you just saw and try to get in, which caused more hand-to-hand combat that the British really weren't at threat as much as the men at Isandlwana were. So that gave time for the guns to cool down and work in. Now, don't get me wrong. At Rorke's Drift, their guns definitely were overheating as well. But it was just the amount wasn't as bad.
Stuck in boxes, fortified, preparations must be swift. Spears and shields of oxen, high-facing uniforms and arms. As the rifles fires echoes high, beating like the sound of guns. Zulus attack, fight back to back. Show them no mercy and fire at will. Kill or be killed.
I just need to stop this real quick because this is actually really funny because this is actually one of the big inaccuracies of the Zulu movie. So this man right here is Color Sergeant Bourne. Now, you can tell he's Color Sergeant because technically, I think it's on his left shoulders, his left arm. I'm not sure if that's actually just a British Army thing, but it has two cross flags on it. That means, obviously, you're the guy who carries the flags. You're a senior NCO. Color Sergeant Bourne was actually one of the younger men at Rorke's Drift. As funny as that is to say, he had recently been promoted. He was actually a very young guy when this happened, and he actually is the last survivor of Rorke's Drift to die. I believe he died a few years after World War I. he was the last survivor. But I like how Zulu tries to interpret him as this older man who, this battle-hardened soldier, which he wasn't. He was a very young man, actually.
Facing, awaiting a hostile spear, a new frontier, the end is near. There's no surrender, the lights must hold, the story told, Rushden controlled.
So the house on fire, the movie kind of interprets it better. I'm sorry I keep talking about the movie because we're supposed to be talking about the history, but that's a good segue into the history. In the movie, it makes it look like it was an accident, that the British accidentally fired their muzzles a little too close to the thatch roofing, and it lit it on fire. That's not what happened. The Zulus lit it on fire. They were trying to push the British out of the hospital, because at the end of the day, you can hand-to-hand fight with the men that were hiding behind the melee walls and the boxes. They were not being able to fight against the guys in the hospital, which, again, a lot of guys in the hospital were actually injured. Granted, it wasn't really battle injuries a lot of them had. Some guys had trench foot. Some guys just had fever, yellow fever, West Nile. It was just guys that were sick, most of them. But they were ordered, if they were able to, they were supposed to fight, and they did. And that's why the Zulus were getting so infuriated, because they pretty much were running against this stone wall that was shooting at them, and they weren't able to kill anyone. So they ended up lighting the roof on fire to smoke out the British. And in the movie, it's showed a little differently, but that is how it happened. They lit it on fire, and the British had to evacuate. Everyone was brought into the church, where you have here Reynolds, the surgeon, was taking care of the men. Reynolds actually is one of the people who won the Victoria's Cross for his actions at Rorke's Drift. Many people won the Victoria's Cross, and knowing A.S. Cotter, I know at the end of the video it's probably going to list all that stuff out. But this is also a really interesting scene. He's sitting here doing his surgery, and he did when this was happening, keep his cool the entire time, which is why he earned the medal he did. Because, you're in the middle of a battle, the two guys meant to guard you are getting killed, and the enemy's coming through the window, and you're just like, hey, someone come over here and help me, while still doing work on the guys dying and needing help. So Reynolds did earn the Victoria's Cross for that. So did Chard and Gonville, Bromhead. Bourne did not. Bourne received the African Service Medal, and I believe another Valor Medal, but he did not receive the Victoria's Cross. You do it. That's sad. Yes, so a few things real quick before we come to an end. So the reason the British ended up winning the Battle of Rorke's Drift, it wasn't because the Zulus were defeated. It was because the Zulus I believe his name, I keep saying the Prince. It's just because I don't remember his exact name, and I hate getting names wrong, but I believe his name was Prince Dewangza. His scouts reported that Chelmsford and the main army was coming back, and now the main army was still bigger. I don't believe it was that much bigger, but the mentality was, okay, one, we're not supposed to be here. 2, I've already lost a lot of soldiers doing this, and 3, I might get cut off from retreating back to Zululand. So what ended up happening was he disengaged from fighting because he was like, this is not worth it. We fought, it was viewed by the Zulus more as a draw, and it was definitely amplified by the British as a victory, which they needed because, you know, at Isandlwana, they lost over 1,600 men. So you have this situation where, you know, the British press is sitting there like, well, what happened after Isandlwana? And the British Army was like, well, you know, these 100 men held off all of the Zulus on their own. And it made this mythos of this idea of the few against the many. You know, Peter Jackson, the director of the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies, he actually took inspiration from Rorke's Drift when filming the Helm's Deep battle scene, because he felt they were similar just because of that gallant idea of heroism of the few against the many holding off. But the reality was, it was just the prince realized, oh, well, I'm not supposed to be here. I thought this was going to be a lot easier than it is, because again, at Isandlwana, they were not fighting an entrenched enemy. They were fighting a stationary enemy that was easy to take on. Whereas here, Bromhead and Chard had dug in and said, we're holding. And that situation alone, you know, the end of the day, the reason the Zulus lost the Zulu War is because the British created an offensive-defensive tactic. You know, the famous Chelmsford Square. Chelmsford's army literally, they didn't travel, but for battle, they were literally a giant square of a few thousand men with Gatling guns and cavalry interiors and everything. And that's really what defeated the Zulus at the end of the day. It wasn't really the firepower or anything like that. The Zulus were good with that. They knew how to combat it. It was the defensive tactics, because at the end of the day, if you're in a very good defensive position, you're not going to win. You're not going to lose as long as your lines are strong and hold strong, especially when you have Gatling guns and repeating rifles. So that is unfortunately what came down for the Zulus, was they did not have that. But overall, great song, love it. The Zulus are actually, actually popular opinion probably. I actually am pro Zulu. I think the Zulus were 100% correct in the situation of the war. Pretty much Cetshwayo, which I'm not going to agree to what Cetshwayo did, because Cetshwayo, much like other kings of that time, especially in a place like Africa and, you know, even Europe, you know, in Zulu Dawn there's this great scene where they are questioning how Cetshwayo killed hundreds of Zulus to get to the throne. And a priest goes, did the French not do the same more recently in history? What about our own kings just a few hundred years ago? I think it's a very good point. I think the Zulus were 100% in the right for the war. They were protecting themselves, and unfortunately, they just lost to European industrialization. Okay, so the other actor from Zulu Dawn's name is Burt Lancaster. That was his name. Burt Lancaster and Peter O'Toole starred in that. And actually, if you ever seen Indiana Jones, Marcus Brody is the one who plays Henry Poulain in Zulu Dawn. I'll be honest, none of these guys look like their actual real-life counterparts, but I just wanted to make sure I got the name, because I was so... I don't know if you noticed the entire video. I was like... Because I knew it, but I didn't. But thank you so much for joining us. Again, the Zulu War is a very interesting subject, especially considering it's one of the few colonial conflicts that really has a place in history, and I think that's really because of the Zulus themselves. Shaka Zulu is such a figure in himself, the founder of the Zulu Empire, which I also have a video on. So I'll also leave that in the link below, and also at the end of the video. But thank you so much for joining us today, friends. I really hope you enjoyed the content. Again, I'm so sorry if I'm not responding to your comments. I work a full-time job, and sometimes I lose track of time because I come home, I try to do videos, 90% of the time I'm either writing a script, researching, or anything, and I fall asleep as soon as I finish doing what I'm doing. But thank you so much all for the support. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you all. If you are a returning viewer, please subscribe. Like I said earlier, I know a lot of you are returning viewers that are just not subscribed. So if you do enjoy my content, please hit that red button and subscribe. if you are returning, and subscribe, or if not, please like, share, and comment. It's a fun video. I love talking to you guys. Like I said, I'm going to try to talk to you guys more. It's been a busy week, especially in my field. Thank you so much, everyone, again, and we will see you in the next one.